Bookshop today. Met her when we opened, and she's just always releasing cool creative stuff, great creative energy, so I'm really happy to have an event for her. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm on Meadow. Thanks for supporting North Figueroa Bookshop. Support your local indie bookshops, support your local indie movie theaters, indie small places. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You get this here.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, thank you guys for being here. So a few things, there's some wine up front. There's also some water up there, so help yourself. Also, just thanks Amadeus. Also, his name is Amadeus. Can we just let that soak in for a little bit? But he's amazing. He's always writing and doing music and doing really cool things. And I'm kind of on this kick of being really excited to be in Highland Park because there's just so much cool creative stuff happening in such a scrappy startup kind of way. So he's definitely part of that. So connect with him. Also, there's a donation box up front, which is entirely optional, but suggested, for offsetting some wine and then just energy and time. So the deal with this event is that I have been creating stuff for my whole life, but I've never really put it out into the world. I've always just done more practical things and tried to make money and things like that. And more recently, I came out with a little book, and I've been trying to get it out into the world. And by doing that, I'm just have been flooded with a bunch of really different thoughts and feelings than I've ever really had before. Because I'm seeing that doing it publicly is really different than doing creative stuff in seclusion. And I tend to, I'm kind of an introvert, and I also tend to suffer alone. When I'm feeling insecure or having some kind of struggle, I just hole up and lick my wounds in private, and then come out when I'm shiny again. And when you do that, you don't get the opportunity to realize that your struggles are something that are shared by other people, and that other people can help and support and things like that are novel to me. So I started talking to more and more people, and just started to realize that so many of these things are so universal and that we should be talking about them. So that's the deal with this whole series. So I want to have more of these, and my thought is that every time there'll be a different panel of people. So I was thinking that while I have this panel of people, I was thinking what is unique about this panel that I can we can dive into more this time. And hi. And okay.
Come through.
Yeah, come on in.
Come on through.
So I have a topic that's specific to this panel, specific to one of you guys, if you don't mind. But before I say that, could you just introduce yourselves and then also say what brought you, what brought you to be working in the field that you're working in?
So my name's Serena. I've been working in-house agency and freelance contracting for 8 years. I say I've fallen into it.
Okay. Or how did you decide to do it, I guess?
So you have to be a certain kind of person to work in an agency. You have to be really fast paced. I work well under pressure and having long lists of things to do. And yeah, I just kind of I'd like to insert myself where I'm helpful, I guess. But I wouldn't necessarily call myself a creative, but I work with a lot of creatives to try and finish a thing. So, yeah. I forgot the question.
You did great.
My name is Grant. So I'm a software engineer, working on kind of starting my own company in the very, very earliest stages of that. So trying to figure out what to actually do. How I got into that, I guess 2 ways. I think One, I've always been like a kind of like math and science guy. It's been like my bread and butter, and like software engineering is obviously like very much like that. I think in the last few years, I've come to realize how a lot of what I actually like to do from a software engineering standpoint is kind of creative. It's really kind of about creating things and building things, and that kind of building a company, kind of starting something from scratch, is kind of really this kind of creative process that I enjoy, because it's really at this intersection of, I get the math and science and the stuff that speaks to part of me, and then kind of the creative aspect, which speaks to a different part of me.
My name is Reeve. I'm a musician, music producer. I also work as a software engineer. I've been doing music for a long time, like since I was an early teenager. And I guess what got me into that is it's actually hard to pinpoint like a specific choice that I made. All I remember is that there was one summer, it was the summer after 8th grade, and I just found myself driven, compelled. I guess I had some kind of impulse that resulted in me sitting in front of a laptop trying to learn software, how to like make music, and I guess express feelings that I didn't at the time have a vocabulary to express. And I think in many ways that has remained true for this whole journey. And the way it's worked out, I expect it to probably be true for a long time to come.
So what I want to talk about is like, Grant. I'm sorry. I want to talk about Grant. I think that this doesn't have to like focus on you. I think that you are in a space that is like, we've all been in, but you're in it right now. And that's a really unique and like interesting and terrifying and exciting space to be in. And that's the space like between paths. Like one thing has ended and then the other thing is going to begin, but it hasn't begun yet. And you're in this like liminal space in between paths, and you don't really know which way you're going to go in. And so what I want to talk about is like the liminal space between paths and the creativity of reinventing yourself. So a little less specifically about like the creativity of like how to write something or whatever, but like the creativity of like how to choose what the fuck we're doing with our lives. And yeah, especially in these liminal spaces where like what is guiding us. So okay, I thought about some like, I want to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
And then we can talk about it and then open it up and we can all talk about it. But I want to like put some like parameters around the way that we're talking about this, because even though we're like using your experience as like a jumping off point, I want to steer away from any kind of advice giving. I think that advice can be like very disingenuous for a lot of reasons, and like not really, I think whatever, there's a lot of reasons. There's this great quote by Anne Lamott, a writer, and she says help is the sunny side of control. I think that's brilliant. I think there's so many reasons why we like give advice in really weird ways, whether it's like to control a part of us that like we're afraid of expressing, that we're like seeing in you, and we're trying to like protect you, protect ourselves or whatever. So let's steer away from advice giving, and I want all of us to just be able to like talk about our experience with this one thing that you specifically are like in a like big way right now. Capiche? Capiche. Okay, cool. So I was thinking, you're in this like liminal space right now. In deciding what to do next, what are the considerations and factors that you're toggling in order to inform that next step? Like whether that's like a goal that you're going for, or like, I don't know, however you want to answer that.
I can answer that. I think where I'm at right now, I feel like it's I'm struggling between trying to figure out like how to balance what I would consider like a top down approach versus like this like bottoms up approach. I think that's like one of my like core struggles right now. Meaning, top down, I have this like long term goal. I didn't talk about this, like how I got into the kind of like space that I'm in, but part of it is creative, like part of it is monetary. I feel like one of the things I want to do in life is to like try to get away from like wage labor. Like that's like something that's important to me. I want to be able to have more control over my time. I want to be able to like be involved in my future kids' lives. I want to be able to take care of my parents, right, when they're older. Like I want to have a lot of control over my time. And there's different paths to get there. But for me, with my skill set, with where I'm at in life, I feel like the high probability like bet for me is to try to start some sort of software company. And like that's kind of this path. But that is very like tops down, right? That's like where do I want to be in 10 years? Like how do I get there? And then there's like the bottoms up aspect of it, which is much more what do I actually like want to do now? Like what am I genuinely interested in? What problems do I feel? What problems do I see in the world? What resonates with me? And that's kind of like the balance that I'm in right now, or like I should say those are like the two pulls on me, and that is at a high level and at every layer down, meaning like even like what idea do I run with is like a pull I feel like for me between this top down approach, which is like logically this idea makes a lot of sense, versus this bottoms up approach, which is like, oh, like I find this very interesting, right? I find this space interesting, and I don't know if it is going to be a long-term viable business, but I find it interesting, so I should go this route. So that's how I've been thinking about it, kind of like roughly in my mind, is like again the top down versus bottoms up. I've been trying to like lean more into like the bottoms up approach. That is very unnatural for me, mostly because I think of the uncertainty and the ambiguity, right? The feeling like, oh, like what if I spend 6 months or a year or 2 years like chasing like what is interesting and I come up with nothing, right? Like that's a very like scary proposition to me, to like waste that time, as opposed to feeling like a top-down approach feels, at least in the moment, like I have more control, right? Because I can like see the path. So that's kind of like what I'm like going through right now, and I'm all ears, right? I mean, other people's experiences I would love to hear, or Serena or Reef.
Can I ask one thing before going to other people? Like, what is? I'm also like, you can like opt out of any of these questions, because I realize that this is like really juicy personal stuff. So like, don't feel free to just be like no.
Okay.
But like, what is? All of these things feel like they're such high stakes, and they like kind of are.
Mm-hmm.
What is the stakes? Like, what is the fear?
I mean, the fear is not like living the life that I think I want to live, right? I mean, I think that's the core of the fear, right? Is that I feel like I have this vision of myself in the future of, again, like goes back to like core identity, right? Like the father that I want to be, or the brother that I want to be, or the friend that I want to be, right? And it feels like this is again, like I said, like the highest probability path to get there. And I think it's easy for me to put a lot of pressure on that. I also try to remind myself, right, there's a lot of like paths to like living happy life, right? There's a lot of paths to being a great father and a great brother and a great son. I mean, all these things, right? There's a lot of paths to that. This isn't the only one. But for me, I think that feels more like a logical statement than it does kind of like an emotional statement.
Okay, I don't have this written down, so I might butcher this quote, but there's this quote by Marcus Aurelius, who I think is a Stoic. And he has this quote that's like, let's say that your life is over. You lived your life, you did it all. You did it all like however you're supposed to. And now you get to like go on from there. What do you do? Like, if there's this idea of like the life that you're supposed to live, and then what happens after that if you get to go again? Is there a difference?
I mean,
I'm sorry, that's a very like it's a very ambiguous question.
like if I
Like, let's say you live your full life and you check all the boxes and you do all those things and you're exactly, you live the life that you that you envision right now and you want to live. And then if you get to go again, knowing that that stuff is already done, you did it. You checked all the boxes.
Do I start with the resources that I ended with, or do I restart at the beginning? Because I feel like a lot of
Yeah,
of
good
the
question.
top down
Good
drive for me again is feeling.
No, you don't start. You don't get to carry over those resources. You just go again, but you don't have all the shoulds anymore. Okay, sorry. What were you saying?
I think I would. I think I would follow a somewhat similar path.
Okay.
Yeah. I think even if I got even if whatever this business is successful and I have control of my time, things like that, I think I would still continue to try to build things and solve problems. I think that I would I don't think I would pack it all up and buy a ranch in Wyoming, right? I don't think that would be kind of my path, right? I think that I'm genuinely interested in solving problems and building things. I think that I might take bigger risks in that, right? Work on longer term problems that are much more ambiguous. But I don't know. I mean, things can change, but I don't think I would change all that much.
Very cool.
I don't know. Yeah, other people.
I don't know, I'm just reminded of when you were in school and you had to choose, you call them electives here, and you had to choose them, and then everybody would freak out of oh, if I don't choose the right electives, then I won't get into the right college, and then the years of strain that was of deciding the rest of your life as a child, and then now none of my friends do what they studied. I don't actually practice what I studied, but it helped. So that was the first thing I thought of I probably would choose maybe different electives and and all of that stuff, and maybe a different degree. I don't know, but it's never too late. After you did all those things and made all those decisions, you can still go back if you want to. So I don't think it's too late. But yeah, that was the first thing I thought of, the pressure as a kid, a 16-year-old, to hey, you have to map out the rest of your life right now. Yeah, and I don't think anyone has stuck to that map, right? I don't know. Well, I didn't. Go, you got something.
There's a very interesting, one of the interesting words that you mentioned when you described your vision for your own future that I found interesting was control. It sounds like there's a particular way that you want to show up, not only for yourself, but also for potentially your family, your children, and from where you are right now, you want to feel like you're in control of taking the steps that'll put you in that place. And it sounds like you've made a calculation where if I want to get there, one of the most important things to secure is basically resources, and how do I secure those resources? And given what I'm skilled at, given where I am right now, this is the highest probability. A lot of what I'm doing right now is just restating or making sure I understand. Highest probability bet that I can make. And I guess tying that into Ariana's question around if you play this all out, I guess the tricky piece of your question has to do with the shoulds. Yeah. There are so many different ways of living a fulfilling life. I think it's very hard to be fulfilled. I think that's a challenge, and I think in many ways I'm trying to do it today and tomorrow, and I'm sure a lot of us are trying to achieve maybe something that's either there or close to it. And I can relate to the feeling of wanting to be in control very deeply. And in many ways, the only reason that I'm doing coding right now is because because I was too scared. Like I left my previous job. I was living in New York for like almost 3 years, up until May of 2023. And I left my previous job in February of 2023 because I got burnt out. Like it was like too chaotic. I needed like a hard eject. And that was like, as soon as I left that job, I was faced with what for me was the first time in my life where I didn't have anybody setting a structure, like telling me what to do basically, and providing me with like a set of expectations that I had to like meet. And it was the first time that I feel or felt that I had a very real chance at doing what you're doing. Maybe not the exact same thing, but there's like maybe some overlap. Perhaps even what you did at some point, or I don't like it was probably somewhere on the timeline. And I moved back to my family's house in Minnesota, like cut my expenses down to almost nothing. Nobody's living in that house. So I was alone, and the first opportunity that presented itself to basically go back into a mode where I was like earning income, having like a stable, going back to like a routine or rhythm that was familiar, I latched onto it right away.
Yeah.
Even though I probably didn't have to. But like, I mean, taking full control of your life is
It's too much.
I had such a deep
Hey,
such a
not
deep
yet, not
admiration.
yet.
And I mean, in so many ways, I want to go back there.
Yeah.
And see if I can like. It's embarrassing to be like, oh, I think I can do it, but I'm not actually doing it.
I wonder, why would that feel, why does one have a value over the other in our eyes? You know, because, apparently the president has someone whose entire job is to dress him. He has someone that, dresses him. Because it's just, too many decisions to make. You only have so much energy to discipline yourself and to, set your routine and to, make decisions. There's some kind of, some idea that's the energy that it takes to it's decision fatigue or something like that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
that is real. And I've been trying to create all my own structures, and it gets to 5 o'clock and I'm all I can do for the rest of the night is watch Great British Baking Show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tapped out, and then that doesn't really work. Cause then, I did that for a while, and I, got kind of depressed, and I'm okay, what the fuck am I doing? I need to do something that's, a little bit, feeding me back a little bit. But, I don't know. I think sometimes something can place such an extreme strain on you that it's not helping you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible that something can be such an extreme strain that it does break the system. And not allow it. So how do we do these things that still allows it to be sustainable? Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think there's any kind of value judgment, but it's an interesting value preference between the or what is the word? I don't think one is better than the other, but it is interesting that we think one is better than the other. We have this idea of oh wow, you can do everything by yourself and you don't need anything or anyone ever. Wow. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think that should be how we. Yes, Dee?
I don't want to, I know you have questions planned, but this seems to be a thing. Because I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear you guys elaborate. It's if you did not have to worry about money or resources, would you be doing the same thing? Would you be on the same path? Because it seems to be the biggest crisis of creativity for me is, you know, the constraints that like the society that I live in puts on me, and a lot of that is the ability to pay for things, food, rent, clothes, and it seems to be like a real worry for I think everyone. I don't know if anyone here's not stressed out about money, but how does that play into what you're doing right now?
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can go.
Sorry.
That's obviously a factor for me, right? And like how I've described kind of my life, right? I mean, the core of it is having enough money that I don't like have to work a full-time job, right? I mean, at like boiled down, that's kind of the core of it, or to have, or to run a company, or to have a product or a business that generates enough money with like, while not having to work full time on that, right? I mean, that's really the core of it. And I think that it's this intersection that's I think really interesting with entrepreneurship and creativity, which is like you have to create something people want, right? And that any artist, right? Not that I necessarily think that I think there's overlap between entrepreneurship and art, not that necessarily what I'm saying, but that like any artist who's trying to make a living like that has to be a consideration, but that in some ways it is kind of at odds with what feels kind of like creativity, right? Which is like kind of creating something for yourself, expressing your worldview, right? I mean, kind of all that. They're like, there's overlap, but they can be kind of at odds. And I think it makes it hard to live in that creative space when it feels like there's a ticking clock, right? Because I think that's like on the flip side of what you're saying. Like I've thought about like doing part-time job, doing full-time job, partly for that, to feel like, okay, if I at least had some money coming in, I would feel in theory, I don't know if this is true, that I was more able to explore kind of maybe without constraint, as opposed to right now it feels like there's a ticking clock, because there is, right? And it makes it really tricky to go from like in that bottoms up or tops down approach, right? Do I follow just what's genuinely interesting and like hope that it turns into something that pays, or do I try to find something that pays that seems interesting enough? Obviously that's like a false dichotomy, right? I mean, there's like a wide range in between, but that's kind of been my experience, I guess, in it.
If it wasn't a concern, I would be making music all the time.
Right.
Like for me, it's very simple.
Yeah.
Like, and I've been trying to orient my life in that direction to where that's hopefully one day a possibility. And that's been how I've basically been trying to orient my life in that way since I was a teenager. And so like the short answer, I guess, for me is like I'm trying to be rich. Like I'm trying to be like majorly rich. Like I just want to like somehow get there.
We want that
then,
for you
like,
too.
Then I can like get a studio, put all this shit in the studio, and that's fun. Like that's the. But I mean, I guess like for me, maybe it's like this is kind of a personal note, but I'm like I'm the eldest of 3 siblings. Like I have 2 younger siblings, and it's just us. Like we've lost our parents, and so this question took on a whole new meaning, like once that change happened. And it's a weird place to be sharing that update, but I feel like it's related and it's on my mind. And so it has like this question has become incredibly real, and I think if I weren't in the position that I'm in right now, I would have felt a lot less pressure.
Yeah.
So that's I mean, like, I feel like I'm compelled to share that just to flesh out the
Yeah.
the context around it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for.
So I have a really weird relationship with money. I've always been really independent and I've always worked on my own. I've always got my own clients and I've always wanted to scale. But when it comes to like being an entrepreneur, you look at money differently because especially if you are paying people and paying services, like you start telling yourself, oh, $10,000 a month would be great. But then if you have a business, like, no, make that like 30, 40,000, 50,000 because you have to pay everybody to do all the things. You have to like make a machine and then you constantly have to feed the machine. And you have to feed it in a repeatable way and like everybody's relying on you. So because of all of that, I'm now obsessed with the idea about becoming a solopreneur and just doing everything myself off my own back
Yeah.
and seeing if I can generate money in that way. I've been spending like time with lots of people that have businesses and I'm always in and out of people's like doors. So behind all business doors is complete chaos. Like I just expect it. I know that like now for my own future, my own business future, expect the chaos, expect the decisions and the issues and everything to pile up, and kind of like be okay with that. Although I've been at it a while, so I'm really kind of disconnecting from society in general and the constraints that society is putting on me. Me and my husband talk about it all the time. We talk about just being self-reliant and just like sustainable. Like groceries, everything, inflation, like it like has all just like gone up and it's always gonna be, it's on the back of my mind all the time. And I kind of like, I think in business as well and in life, I just like to break rules. I'm trying to break the rules now when it comes to what society expects and like the home I want to live in and how I want to live my life. And I'm trying to see if I can phase money out of it. But that's impossible because I have a retirement fund and I'm just hoping that company still exists in 30, 40 years. But there's no way of me to tell. Like all of the securities and stuff that I try and put in place never even feel that secure, even though I've been really like, I like to think I'm well versed. I like to think I've really made good decisions along the line, and I'm still worried. I'm still worried about it, and yeah, and it, especially with project work. When's the next check coming? Like even after a big project, you're like, oh, I should still like look for more work, but I'm really tired after that. Like, let me just have a week rest. Yeah, and I'm hoping that there will be a time I'll feel comfortable. But it really just does depend on society. How much do you want to be involved in work? How many people do you want to hire? Like what are all of your outgoings and incomings and things like that? Yeah, and also where do you take your calculated risks that you want to take? And I think it's okay to not take risks. And I think I'm comfortable with the fact of like, hey, I'm not a billionaire because I didn't take those risks, then that's fine. That's fine with me. Like I'm okay with not losing everything. Yeah, but if I had, going back to the question, if I had all the money in the world, what would I be doing? And I think that is definitely just like working on happiness. A couple years ago, I was like, I'm going to put my health over my wealth. And that year changed everything for me. Like everything started happening for me. Like yeah, just happiness wise because like I've been obsessed with money since like I lost my father quite young. I was brought up by a single parent, saw how hard she was working, and then just knew that like the baton would be passed down. It's like, okay, yeah, you got to do this too. Yeah, but if I didn't have any money, I'd just definitely just work on my health and happiness, and that's it.
Beautiful.
I want to say something about that because I've thought a lot about happiness over the last few years of depression. No, just kidding. I drift in and out. It's just part of me. But I think that like happiness and comfort are things that we like often go towards, and I don't really know if it works like that. Like if those are the things that like we should really be attempting, like setting as our North Star. There's something that I think about quite a lot, which is like, you've heard this before, like in the night sky, like if you look at a dim star, if you look at it like straight on, it disappears, and then if you look at it to the side, then it comes, then you can see it. And there are different parts of our eyes that, like, one of them, like the periphery is better at night vision than the like, so there's like a reason for it. But I think of happiness a little bit like that as well, which is like, if you're like heading for it and it's your only goal, like, good luck. Like, that's that's tough. And I think comfort too. But I don't know. I think that we're all a little different in that. Like, for me, so last year, I was working a corporate job, and I really didn't like it, and it took like 2 or 3 days for me to realize that, like, I cannot do this. And so I kind of like concocted this plan of like how to get laid off. And so I just like built up my own kind of creative stuff as I was like just like acting well-intentioned but like a little hopeless and just not very effective. And it was great. I highly recommend that strategy. But it was because I knew that like I wasn't ready to jump off that cliff, but I also have the self-knowledge to know that when someone pushes me off a cliff, I'm pretty good at like learning how to fly on the way down. And like that's like definitely like how I learned how to swim, by jumping in the deep end of the pool. That's like my strategy. I don't know if that works for everyone. It works for me. But I think it was because like for me, I'm kind of like, I kind of just like, if I'm like I kind of just want to like hang out in life. Like, I'm really comfortable just like kind of hanging out, you know? And I don't like have all these like huge dreams of like world domination or anything like that. I don't care. So I know that I need like a little bit of a fire under my ass in order to like get my shit together and like, okay, this is the direction, this is what we're doing. So I guess I'm like thinking about the relationship of like comfort and happiness as like goals, and like, are those actually helping us or not?
Like,
Or-
tying that back into, like, you brought up Marcus Aurelius and like Stoics earlier, and this to me feels very in line with my understanding of that like school of thought, where like my understanding of what they were trying to do is like they weren't in pursuit of some type of ideal.
Right.
Like, they weren't in pursuit of. I would be very surprised if one of them was like, I'm trying to find like this. I'm trying to find happiness, or I'm trying to like work towards it. It to me, like, they were almost like trying to develop this indifference to fate, where like it's kind of like a way of being in the world where no matter what hits you, you're just like, all right, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'll still like, all right, like I'm still here. Like, I'm still gonna do it. Like, okay, I'll still like go another day. And I it also like find beauty in it. Like, I guess maybe beauty is not the right word. Maybe appreciation or something like that. So it feels consistent.
Yeah.
At the very least.
What feels consistent?
What you were just saying about
with the
happiness.
Stoics,
And,
yeah.
Yes.
I want to offer just a different definition of happiness that changed my way of seeing it, which is to be with what is happening. It's not like joy, that's different, but it's to be with what is happening, which I think is in line with.
I like that.
Even when it sucks.
Especially.
Yeah,
Be with it.
All work sucks. I think if it's for yourself or for someone else, you're really expelling your energy to get something out, and it's always kind of painful no matter what it is. So I think like trying to find comfort in creating is like I don't see that happening. Like I can see it like being a drain every time you have to like
Really?
produce something.
Does it ever like give you energy? Does it ever feed you?
When it's done,
Okay.
when it's
okay.
finished.
Interesting.
Yeah, when it's finished, you're on top of the world. You're like, oh yeah, I could do anything, and then the next day you're like, nah, I'll wait a while.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
I guess piggybacking off what you said and picking up some threads that you've all talked about, I wonder if you could maybe describe your experience with discomfort rather than like aiming for comfort or finding comfort, because in my experience it's something that you have to become familiar with, because there's some aspect of that involved in my entire creative life. The act of creating, the support of creating the thing, having another job that can like pay the bills while I still do my other thing on the side, and the discomfort in like knowing that that is taking up most of my energy. Like discomfort is sort of wrapped in all the things that we do. And I hear a lot of anxiety from all of you, which I also feel. And I wonder if, like, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about your familiarity with discomfort and how that might affect and alleviate some of that anxiety, because if we know that's part of our experience, then we can roll with it in the way she just said. Just being present with the thing often can let us sort of relax and take all that pressure off of the goals that we're trying to meet or the anxieties that we have.
So the question is like, what's your
relationship with discomfort? How do you?
Can we start with yours?
I think I've come to a place where I try to hold a lot of different things to be true at the same time, and that lets the discomfort sort of spread out across a variety of feelings and experiences. And that, I think that helps me give myself space to say that what I'm doing is okay. Like Grant said, there's a million ways to pursue any type of creativity, any type of life that you want. And I just happen to be choosing one while I'm dealing with all the other aspects of being a human being. And so yeah, I think that's my main answer to that. Is like letting many things be true at the same time. Moving off that.
There you go. No, go for it.
My relationship with discomfort, honestly, I don't know the word for it, but when you're in certain situations, especially in an agency setting, I honestly kind of like it. When people, if there's a situation that's like intense, I always try and work around that. And it depends where you get your creative energy from. Some people's creative energy is really manic, and I'm all about that. I'm all for that. Yeah, and like, it's cool working with talent, but it's also like really unpredictable. But that's what makes it cool for me. But sometimes that can be really uncomfortable depending on who it is. I'm sure you understand. And yeah, I think that it's really cool to embrace discomfort. It sounds really cheesy, and I know that there's an entire YouTube channel based on this, and an influencer has based his entire personality on this, which is just he seeks discomfort, and that's like every episode of how he can make himself uncomfortable. But then you've seen it.
I haven't, but I love it. I didn't notice it.
Like at the end of every episode, it's literally like, what does he learn from like doing something that he would never do, or making himself so uncomfortable, and yeah, and it's like a whole range of things. And I think that's like, it leads to more feeling or human feelings, and yeah, and like so like people drive me into kind of like figuring out or looking at that is kind of interesting to me. Yeah, I don't know if that's psychotic or not. But
I relate to that deeply. I think for me, what is uncomfortable is feeling like I'm squandering my life. Like feeling like I'm putting energy towards the wrong things. That feels like a crime. And then feeling like parts of myself are being shut down. Like not all parts of me are like alive and activated and like in use. So when you're saying like the discomfort YouTube channel, like I get that. Like there's something about like I think like the way that I will very often like deal with difficulty is like to disassociate, which is definitely not a desired choice, but it's just like whatever constitution I have, like that's what I go towards. And for me, I think the practice is in like, and I hate that. I hate that because I love feeling. And because I want to feel connected to everything. And I do, I think, feel like connected to the world and connected to everything, and I want that. And so when I like this, when I do like disassociate, then it makes me feel like disconnected from the things that are like the most important things to me and like this life, and I feel like I'm missing it. So yeah, in terms of like I get that discomfort thing. It's like, you know, we all have our weird ways of dealing with that, like jumping out of airplanes and like, you know,
like
whatever,
adrenaline.
like adrenaline or not, I don't know, whatever. All of our different ways of like reminding the parts of us to like be alive and feel. Yeah.
I feel like I feel very anxious right now. I mean, this is going back to like I feel like anxiety is like my defining emotion for the last like 3 months since I've been on this journey, right? I think anxiety is like the core of how this feels, and for me, I think it's very much like a work in progress. But I think the anxiety, like the core of the anxiety for me, is like it's like always like fear, right? It's like what am I scared of, right? And I think it's always, again, for me, it's always not being blank enough, right? It's always the sense of like not being good enough, or not being smart enough, or not being creative enough, or not being thoughtful enough, or whatever, right? That's like the core, I think, of what drives my anxiety in general, but in this process in particular, right? Is like feeling like, okay, if I don't achieve this outcome, right? If I don't achieve this whatever, this lifestyle or successful business or whatever, that says something about me, right? Like it says something about the fact that like I'm set up to do this, right? And again, this is kind of the anxiety talking, right? I'm set up to this, I have the skills to do this, I have the time to do this, right? I've like kind of done this before in different ways. If I don't do it, like that says something about me personally, right? So that's like the deep, I think, discomfort, really kind of anxiety that I feel. And I think that a few things. I think one, I try to remind myself, I try to like do a couple things. I think zoom out a lot and be like, who gives a shit, right? Like I am like so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Like no one's gonna remember me, like whatever, in 100 years or 200, whatever it is, right? Like no one's gonna remember me. Like it doesn't really matter, right? And I don't mean that like that doesn't depress me, right? Like no one's gonna I'm just like, it doesn't matter. I'm just like little blip, like who cares, right? Also, I think, kind of feel like anxiety, right? Kind of like anxiety only lives when we're like outside the moment, right? It only exists between the present and the future, the present and the past, right? And I try to remind myself of that and put systems in place to focus on the moment, to focus on like, okay, like I'm not going to worry about a month from now. I'm not going to worry about a year from now. I'm just gonna like try to figure out like what I got to do today. I'm just gonna focus on like what I got to do today, and just trust that if every day I focus on like what I got to do today, that I'm gonna like end up somewhere that's meaningful. But again, it goes back to like the top down versus bottoms up approach, right? Like that approach is very much a bottoms up approach, and the top down approach is kind of what also creates a lot of that anxiety.
You ever thought about a sideways approach?
What do you think of? What do you think of the sideways approach?
Just like let the term sit with you for a moment.
Okay.
Not to like be giving advice or anything.
Yeah.
What does the sideways approach look like? Teach us the ways.
Figure that out.
Well, there was a movie you just drank Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
No, that movie's terrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Also Merlot, there's a lot of really good Merlots in the world. Stuff like that. I'm a Malbec kind of gal.
What
Yeah,
systems?
we'll talk about that later.
What systems? You said you have systems in place.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too.
Yeah.
we're all
like-
just desperate to learn from each other. Like, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still trying to figure this out. I mean, is the honest answer. This is like very much like what I'm in the thick of is like trying to figure out the system. But for me, I think one thing that helps is having some focus and like a simple like system is like I think of it like list, rank, iterate, right? So for me, meaning like what are all the things I could be doing, right? Like get them all, like what are all the things I could be doing right now? What are all the ideas I could be working on? What are all the things I could be kind of creating? Right? And then rank those in some way, right? Like, okay, I think that this is the most interesting to me, right? If I had to do all these right now, whatever, like this is the most interesting to me. So I'm just gonna start there, right? I'm gonna put these other ideas to the side and I'm gonna like start there. And if that doesn't work, if that doesn't speak to me, then I'm gonna iterate, right? I'm gonna go to the next one. So like that's kind of for me like a system or focusing on time, right? So going back to like being terrified of like wasting a bunch of time, right? It's like, okay, let me just like tell myself I'm gonna focus on this for like 2 weeks. Right? Let me take one idea that I'm most excited about. Let me just like focus on this for 2 weeks. And what that looks like is maybe it's like talking to 5 people who I think might like have this problem, right? Or maybe it's like for me again, like building a landing page and like trying to get people to see it, right? Or people interested, right? It's like going from the systems for me help going from this like really abstract idea into like what do I do today, right? And for me that's like this really hard. It takes like a lot of thought and energy for me to go from like oh like I want to like build a software business to like okay like what do I do tomorrow morning, and systems like that help because then I can focus on it's kind of like I don't know it's like kind of like putting like a workout plan in place, right? It's like okay once that's in place all I gotta do is like iterate, all I gotta do is execute. At least for some period of time. And maybe I check in a month or maybe I check in a week. But for some period of time, I'm out of like all these like decisions and more focused on like, okay, I just gotta like execute, right? I'm just gonna execute, see where I'm at, and then reevaluate. So I don't know, again, very much in the thick of trying to figure out like what works for me. But it helps again with the anxiety for me.
This has worked for me, but it's never occurred to me to do it on a regular basis. I'll do it, I'll think, oh, that was pretty good. And then like 3 weeks later, I'm like, you know what I'll do? I'll make a list.
I think it helps. I think one of the things I think about is like almost everything I do is some sort of like system, right? Whether I think about it or not, right? When I like get ready for bed, I do the exact same thing in every order, right? Like I don't think about it, but it's like the exact same thing, right? When I figure out like what groceries I'm gonna order, I execute this like process in my mind, right? It's like this system of like, okay, like what do I feel like eating, right? And then it's like, okay, well like let me find like a recipe for those things. So let me find this, right? It's not the only system, right? Like a different system could be here are the like 10 things that I cook. I just like go through them one by one, right? And that's kind of like a different system. So it's not entirely true, but I think like we all kind of run through systems in our daily life. It's just kind of a difference between like, are they really like kind of like documented systems, right? Things that we're like really intentional about, or are they systems that we're just kind of like naturally do? And there's nothing, and there's no, again, like back to the fact, there's no like right or wrong there, right? I mean, most things we do work totally fine, right? Figuring out what your grocery list is, the system we all use is probably totally fine.
Most things are actually okay, even if we're worried about it.
Yeah.
I think one of the benefits is just like eliminating that like decision fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
So that like and for me like when I'm like at a low, that's not the time when I'm the most resourceful. Like that's the time when I'm at a low, that's the time when I'm just like I don't know how to do anything. And then it's like obviously that's not true, but like then if there's a system that's there waiting for me, then like that's the thing that can like bring me back up to a space where I do feel like you know useful again, a bit able again. Yeah.
Well, if we tie our value system less to what we do and who we are, rather than basing how good you feel in a day by what you've done, perhaps there's a deep meaning to that general happiness. If we manage to get to a place where we're content in ourselves, then we'll be able to do things that make us happy, and therefore our work will shine and attract what we want.
That's so scary.
What does that system look like?
It's not a system. It's just a way of being. It's about having that happiness in yourself and who you are.
So
And knowing that that's not tied to the work that you just did or the you know the car that you drive or
so I reached like this really interesting point during the pandemic where like the pandemic hit and I was like, yes. Like I was really like I was ripe for it. And it whatever, like the just going deeply internal for a very long period of time like worked for me. And I reached this point where I was like really happy and I felt like really like comfortable with all of the demony things and I got to this point where I was like, I'm good. Like I really feel like I'm good. And then I was like, is this enlightenment or is this depression? And like I think there's like a really thin line between like enlightenment and depression. Cause like, okay, great. So you find inner peace. Now what? What the hell are you gonna do with the rest of your life? Like how do you like direct how do you like direct your actions?
so you know
Yeah.
finish it.
But like what do you do? Like what
No, overcome. I think.
it's just like
I think again, it's like for me, when I started to decode like these conditioning aspects that I built into my life, like oh, am I at this point in my career? You know, it's complex, and we all have these real complex kind of like things that make our personality. But once I got to like the root of it and kind of was able to see through all of these you know these moments that I had in my life when I go through something really challenging and then I'd be like, it's fine, I'll just put up with it because I'm going to reach this goal. And then because I hadn't reached that goal, I then was frustrated at myself.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to like disconnect from all of these ideas that I'd made of myself because they were causing this conflict internal, very subconscious, that I would be like, oh, I'm not there yet, you're not good enough. And an internal voice that's like telling you off. But ultimately, yeah, it came back to just getting to know myself better and know what I like and not being like swayed by the social influence, because that's what the majority of the world's doing, you know, they're shouting because they're scared. Like, be like me because otherwise you're nothing, because that's what they got told, and you know, trying to like just be content being, because you know it's pretty good just to wake up with the sunrise, you know, drink coffee.
I guess going off from what he said, well, there are benefits to growing old, folks. I have kind of found some of that. It's taken me a really long time. You know, I was in the corporate world in New York for many, many years. I wanted to be a creative when I was very young, but I had fear, I had insecurity, and I worried about what other people thought about me, and I was just chicken, so I never followed it. And I had a lot of success in what I did, but I never felt like I was successful. I always thought like, you know, everybody knows I'm a fake. I threw it all away, and now I'm pursuing my creative side, and I am like, the happiness comes from here. It's gotten, stuff doesn't make you happy. I mean, it's like you say, when you finish your project, you're like, you know, okay, it's over. You know, it's the stuff just doesn't do it. It took me a real long time to figure that out. And as you said, you know, there are times where I go like, everything sucks, but like, that's so cool. Like, I'm okay with everything sucking because I'm okay with me. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but yet I don't think I could be doing what I'm doing now. I couldn't have done it when I was in my 20s. I wasn't ready for that, you know. And
what
now,
about it?
Huh?
What about it? What would have gotten in your way?
You. Me. Yeah. You know, I've gotten in my way my whole life. And I'm just at this point, I'm a firm believer that everything happens the way it's supposed to. You know, and you know, I'm also like, you know, just deal with what you have. You know, it's like you can't control what happened yesterday. You can't control what happens tomorrow. All you have is today, and that's why they call it a present. You know, I mean, yes, you should have a slight, you know, you can't shut out the future, but there's a system to get to that. But that shouldn't like be the end all and be all, because you never know what's going to happen on that journey. It's, I guess it's the journeys that is the important part, and most people don't end up where they started the journey off to go to, and that's not necessarily bad. But it also then comes back to, stuff don't make you happy.
Yeah.
So I had a friend, and she's like someone who I just respect her mind so much, and she told me, she's like, I don't think people can be happy if they're not like struggling. She like did this thing where it's like happiness comes from struggle, and I was so resistant to it because I was like, I'm so sick of struggling. I'm in the pursuit of no longer struggling because I'm exhausted of struggling. And then like I thought about it more, and I thought about how great I feel on the other side of a struggle and how uncomfortable it feels while you're in the middle of it, but then passing through it and being able to take away what you learned, being able to like feel this deep spectrum of sadness and confusion and discomfort, and how that actually did inform, like, it told me so much about what made me happy and how to obtain happiness. And it's such a weird thing to think about, like, happiness coming from discomfort and struggling and uncertainty, because yeah, man, everything's just like so complicated, and there's so many different factors that like I think trying to avoid discomfort, I kind of lean into it now, maybe too much. But I'm happy.
You look happy.
It's me laughing from all the pain.
Tears just
Jamie.
I was just gonna ask, does everyone think that there's like different types of discomfort? Because there's a whole levels. Like maybe like here to here is great, here to here is not productive.
Okay.
Like a little bit of anxiety pushes you to do the thing, but a lot of anxiety cripples you to not know what the hell to do.
So I made a worksheet about that.
Not
about that.
I saw the signal. You were like,
If only there was a worksheet there.
I'm gonna thank you for reminding me. I'll put it like after all this is done. I'll like if you guys want it. I don't want to give it now because I want us all to be here. But yes, I think that that's like every growth is always gonna require discomfort. But like, how do you know? This is what all this is about. It's like a series of questions that are like leading you to be able to figure out how you know if the discomfort is the right kind of discomfort. Because I very much think that there are wrong kinds of discomfort. But it's so complicated, because I also think that like our brains are really confusing things. and I think like something that we like that complicates this whole thing is that like we get conditioned in certain ways, but then like breaking that conditioning might lead us to more happiness or more whatever, more like alignment with who we are or whatever it is, but then breaking that conditioning is going to be really uncomfortable and it's going to feel wrong. So then like how do you know if that's like the right kind of wrong or the wrong kind of wrong? So I have my questions over here, we'll talk about that later, but anyone have ideas about that?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I have some thoughts on this. It's like, I definitely agree. I think there are different kinds of discomforts. I think that, so one of the things, I guess tying this back to your question about my own relationship with this whole idea of discomfort, one of the things that I tend to do when I'm feeling lost or like without a guide, and this has been true for like many years, is I'll typically actually turn to books. And when I do that, the tendency that I have is to latch on to particular authors. If I find somebody whose work resonates with me, then I'll just go and like read all their shit. And one of those authors was this guy named Nassim Taleb. I don't know if any of you have heard of that guy. He wrote a book called The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. He's this like Lebanese American statistician who did like options trading for a long time and then went into philosophy.
Limitless. Yeah.
He has a book. I definitely like. I don't think I'd want to be in a relationship with him. I mean, I would love for him to be my uncle. That particular dynamic, like, that would be like in my other life. Round 2, that's what I'm
That's
trying to.
your
That's
goal.
what I'm trying to make
Cool.
happen. He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, and it's kind of, there's like a similar, like you talk about discomfort, he talks about stressors, and he talks about these different kinds of stressors where like certain stressors are chronic, and then certain stressors are like acute, kind of pointed, and what he argues is that like those kinds of stresses are actually they're very important. And without them, you entropy, or you kind of just like things don't happen. Growth doesn't happen. Like change doesn't happen. And so definitely, I'm in pursuit of certain kinds of discomforts, and I do try to avoid I try to do my best to avoid getting into situations where like the chronic discomfort or the chronic stressors end up like taking over.
Yeah.
And that can happen. Like, I mean, this week that was kind of happening. That's I guess how I try to approach it, and also like a way that I think about it, or like a way that I've been influenced to think about it. Yeah.
I like that.
I always think I have a client, and she's a psychologist, and she's an expert in OCD and anxiety. So I've learned a lot through listening to her about, what it's like having OCD. And it's an interesting thing to think about the topic of discomfort, because for people with OCD, it can manifest so many different ways, but, thinking that you're living a compulsion to find relief, right? So maybe you're counting things, and you have a certain specific routine that you have to do before bed in order to feel relief, right? And then you'd be like, okay, now everyone in my family will be safe if I just count a certain number of books. But what, as a psychologist, breaking free of that compulsion looks like is sitting in a place of discomfort, because it's actually so uncomfortable for people to not do that routine. So they have to be in a place that is extremely uncomfortable in order to ultimately find the place of true relief that they want to achieve. So whenever I think about discomfort and like having to tolerate discomfort, that's where my mind goes, is, and there's different shades of that, but that always comes to mind for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
That reminds me, Zen and the Art of Archery is one of my favorite books, if anyone has read that. Not a single person. I just made it up. No, just kidding. It is a real book, and it's phenomenal. No, my dad's read it. But it's a little bit too much to try and fully explain, but it's this man who learns archery in the 60s or something like that. You can chime in and help explain it if you want.
In Japan.
In Japan.
Master.
He studied with and he essentially learns that archery and like so many other of the like Japanese arts are essentially just like practices in Zen. And and some an idea that he talks about throughout the book that just like I think about all the time is this idea of tension, of like holding tension, and like holding like a good kind of tension. And it's this idea that like if we are connected to ourselves and the moment and the total uncertainty of everything, then like that is going to manifest in a tremendous amount of tension that we are just like hopefully more and more like comfortable holding. And don't collapse that tension. Like don't like that what you're talking about. It's like so many of us are just like seeking constant relief and like catharsis from that tension. And as opposed to just like holding it until the right thing falls, or until like I don't know exactly how to like know that what that final point when you do release it.
But that is the thing. In
Yeah.
the archery, hitting the target was being so in tune with every aspect that you almost don't even know when you release.
Yeah.
You know, if you're thinking about it, you're gonna miss.
Yes.
Wow. And so when you're part of it, you just do it because you're part of it.
Yeah.
You're part of it having to hit the arrow, so it releases.
Right. As opposed to like our brains are so good at coming up with all of these purposes and all of these directives and these ideas of the things that we should be doing, and like all of that stuff just like muddies the water and gets in the way of just what is like here and present and right and needed.
Yeah, I feel like people are just looking for more balance in general. I know that I am. Like, why can't just the present moment be like what it is? Like, why can't that be everything, you know? And one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to spend my entire life so wrapped up in worrying about what I'm doing or not doing. And then even if I get everything that I think I've ever wanted, it's still not being enough.
Yeah.
And you talk about like wanting to feel connected to everything. Like that's when I feel my best.
Yeah.
Like regardless of anything else that is happening in my life. My thoughts are all over the place because everyone's like talking about bringing up such amazing things, but I think being present and just like noticing and being curious all the time is like what I try to hold on to.
Yeah.
See where that takes me.
And I'm thinking about what you're saying, what Josh was saying earlier, and this like anxiety. I believe is society kind of pressuring you. Sorry. Put this down. Yeah, like I've been feeling this like rejection of what society expects quite a lot. Because it's one of those things like what Josh was saying, why can't we just like be happy with like waking up and it's a beautiful day and like feeling all that presence. And it's because we do have these, like, I don't know whether it's a caveman thing, like an acceptance thing, or like, you know what I mean? Like this core of like, I have to be the leader of a thing. Like I don't know where that comes from. But I do think it's animalistic sometimes in my head. Like I'm starting to feel like, oh, like there's no reason actually for me to do that. But I find myself consciously trying to reject that from society. Like be like, society doesn't expect me to do that. Although I'm just like bombarded with media and messaging that's like, you need to be the leader of the thing. Go on.
I was gonna say, do you think kids have that? Or do you think we learn it?
Oh, the kids. Oh my God.
The children.
The children. The thing is, there are leaders of the pack of kids as well. So I don't know what age it starts, but there's always been like, cause there's like playground hierarchy sometimes as well. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't know what age it starts.
Yeah, I think about like the parents' influence, like no
Yeah.
school, it's like
Yeah, exactly.
children.
Yeah.
Right? And then like in being Asian as well, it's like you're a doctor or a lawyer or you're a failure. So
Oh my
like
God.
yeah, there's all that stuff, and then I was never gonna be that because I don't want any life or death situation in my hands. Like ever. So like that's actually what I say now, and in the work I'm doing now, I'm like, no one's gonna die. It's not a life or death situation, and I intentionally did that to make sure I was never gonna be in charge of a life or death situation. So whenever anyone is like crazy of like I need this on this date, and I'm like no one's gonna die. Like you're fine.
Great. Know yourself.
But yeah, but it's like I think shedding the society norms, that's gonna be the most like uncomfortable thing like to experience, because we all want to be in a group. We all came today because like we appreciate like a group. We're social animals. So like to reject that is probably like, is that a healthy thing to do?
To reject it.
You know what I mean? Like right? Like to reject your group or something.
I know.
There's always another group that will think like you.
I
You
know,
just have
but you
to-
lose
you
so
have to
much.
leave the group.
Choose your guys one.
Yeah, but then even then it's like you have to be in like a commune.
And then what happens?
To
And
really
then you
survive.
like lose your like childhood friends, you know? And like,
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of had that. I had like a falling out with a few of my like childhood friends. And like, because we were just heading in like such different directions. And I was just like, I couldn't. It was, you know, we were like not in the same place anymore. It wasn't really working.
Yeah.
But then also these people know me. They really do. Like there's this old
No,
deep
they know
connection.
the 12-year-old you. They don't. You have changed.
They know parts of me.
Yeah.
Not all parts of me, but it's still a loss. Like I think it's I think it's like important to acknowledge that like with any kind of growth comes a tremendous amount of loss.
Yeah.
And it's real, you know? What?
Discomfort.
Yeah.
That's the discomfort.
I mean,
Yeah.
isn't so much of art and the things that we like, the actual thing we're creating, not the talking about the thing. The thing itself is like a certain, like you have to have an extreme amount of bravery, because in that thing that you create is your voice, and you say it loud enough that it may reject a lot of other aspects of what society as a whole. Like there's so much beautiful, brilliant art is like a big fuck you to all of the things that aren't real that everybody else has constructed around us. And so I think like the bravery in perpetuating that is all part of the like sitting with the discomfort and knowing that you are going to be uncomfortable telling someone through your art that the whole structure in which they live is false. And that I think that's where that question of mine came from, is because like you have to like kind of love discomfort in a way because it's so familiar. Like it's your best friend in the creation of art, because that is the
Check.
like loud voice of yours that has to must speak, right?
Yeah, it's the irrational. Like we've been talking a lot about like these rational systems and things, and it's like those are to create our ability to reckon with our collaboration with the irrational at some point within the creative process. Otherwise, you're making something that is, you know, and also something that I feel like I want to bring in, like, it's like we've been talking about comfort and discomfort, but then there's also safety within, like, what is needed, and yeah, and that being a different level of need, because there's discomfort and there's different kinds of discomfort, but then there's like your life being threatened or a sense of it being threatened for this, that, or the other reason, and the capacity that how that limits the capacity, and I just wanted to bring that in, and all.
You wanted to say something. Is it still relevant?
Yeah, I mean, this conversation's really flying in a lot of directions. I want to go back to what you were saying about society's expectations. I feel like a lot of, as creative people, we have a lot of ambitions in ourselves and or for ourselves, and we have a lot of expectations of ourselves. I feel like a lot of my discomfort comes from just having a lot of unrealistic expectations in myself, a lot of just maybe unrealistic or realistic, I just don't want to do it, but expectations put onto me. How do you all kind of deal with just your expectations in general from like going haywire? Because I feel like that's a huge part of just like even happiness. Just like I find when I don't expect anything, I'm the most happy because I'm just kind of open to whatever happens. I'm trying to do that more to myself as like an artist, but yeah, how do you all kind of deal with your expectations, as unrealistic as they may be?
there's a skill to managing expectations, but like I personally am not great at
But I don't have that skill.
I don't have that skill, but there is like you can only manage expectations if you really know how something's going to play out, or if you've been through something before and you're like, look, I've seen this play out and this is how it's going to go, or something like that's like a managing expectation. I think that if you don't manage expectations, you have a world of weight. People will expect the world from you, like. They want to be blown away by something that you make, or I don't know, but like managing expectation is definitely like, yeah, it's a skill that everybody should use and get good at, but it takes a lifetime to get good at it.
I feel like I think that there is an element of, someone said this on Thursday, is like stay delusional. I think that's like a necessary part of being an artist, is like stay delusional. You have to, and maybe there's some way that we can like hold those, but like maybe just a little lighter. You know, like not get rid of them, but just like also just like have our grip just loosen a little bit.
Yeah, being delusional is very addictive.
It definitely is.
I've wondered kind of recently for myself, back to what I said earlier about kind of like the anxiety and being enough, is like kind of is ambition just like another form for me of like self-criticism, right? Kind of this idea of like is ambition, like I've kind of thought of myself as fairly ambitious, and I've thought of that as a good thing in general. But I think recently, it started off with someone saying like ambition is a burden, which I thought was interesting. It's kind of like, like that kind of resonates. And then thinking about it more, I don't have a good answer to it. I don't think it's black or white, but kind of this idea of like, for me, like how much of ambition really is like a nice way to spin the I'm not good enough yet narrative, right? Like when this thing I create is here, or when this thing is successful enough, or when I'm in this stage of life, or whatever it is, like then I will be X, right? And again, I don't think all ambition is probably like that, but for myself, I've wondered how much of kind of what I feel is ambition is actually just that core feeling.
Interesting.
Oh, well, no, you can.
You haven't said anything.
Okay. I feel like culturally we don't talk about failure in any kind of positive way. And that something I was reading online, they were saying that we never hear about failure from failures, we hear about it from successful people. So it's like, yeah, you just fall and you get back up and you keep going. It's like a lot of stories, you just fucked up. You just fucked up and then you just move on. Like, that sucks, but everyone fails at some point at least a couple things.
I've never felt that so hard.
Yeah, I just think I've let so much go at just being like, I could fuck this up right now. And like almost welcoming it instead of being afraid of it, because it is certain. But yeah, like I said, in our culture, especially in this like hyper individualistic world we're in right now, it's like, no, that failure is the opposite of what you want. I think it can be woven into the storyline and not be like this huge pitfall necessarily.
If you like, yeah, like if you like if you lived all the time with someone who was constantly telling you that what you did wasn't good enough, you would fucking hate that person, and eventually, hopefully, you'd be like, "Fuck you! Like I'm done."
Is that how that works? I don't know if that's how that works.
It absolutely
I
can.
think often it just gets like deeper and deeper into our bones.
I've done it to my dad, and I've quit lots of jobs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, and not all the time, but like it works sometimes internally.
Yeah.
You know, there's the part of you it's never good enough for.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fun to be like, yeah, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'm finished. This is it. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
If you make it like you split yourself up.
I'll show them all.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be fun to fail, or fun to, and it's not necessarily
I love
fail.
that.
Fun to like call it enough.
Yeah.
To be like, the part of you that feels like it's not good enough is viewing that as failing or as like burning it all down or whatever, but really, 6 to 7 times out of 10, you put that out in the world and someone's gonna validate it for you. If you've got a community of people, someone's gonna be like, oh, like it's not that. Either it's not that bad, or oh, actually that's really good. I don't know why you're so down on yourself about that.
I mean, it might seem corny, but can you have success without failure? Because otherwise, it's really not a success. It's just a regular thing. You know. So you need both, or it's not a success. It's just what it is, and you'd be bored.
You need a reference level of like, oh, it could have gone that way, but it didn't.
Yeah. Okay, so there is an event after this, so we should wrap up somewhat soon, but are there any other like bursting comments?
I was gonna say that a lot of it's boundary setting, you know. What are those folks accept? What will you accept? And then internally as well, what do you accept from yourself? And like the kinder that we can be to ourselves, the easier it is to make mistakes, and therefore grow.
Self-kindness.
I just wanted to offer a different, or I'm not even sure what I'm gonna say. I hear a lot of like very ambitious type A people here, and I just want to offer up the non-ambitious, like I would be happy just to play and create and like within. I don't know if I have the same drives. Like I don't have children or want to have children. So I maybe that just puts a barrier there that like I don't have to consider things past the end of my lifetime. But in a lot of ways, I feel like that where, I mean, I'm driven to do things, but it seems like there's not that urge, which I've always respected. I've always my relationship with ambition has been I don't have it and I feel bad about that. Not I have it and I feel good about it. But it's still the same thing. It's still that like shining example of like what we should live up to, that I think we're all kind of discovering different relationships with it.
Yeah.
What is the urge that drives you? What do you say?
I don't know. It's different things. Sometimes it's a lark, like just some thing that I want to play around with and see what happens, and it feels like a lot of the time.
Thank you so much.
I once threw out a painting that I worked on for like a year and a half. I feel like
He's
threw-
actually a very talented painter, so it's not like a kind of schmuck here. Like you're very good at work. Yeah.
We'll be the judge.
Yeah.
I'll be the judge.
Society pressures you.
But I worked on it for a year and a half. I had people saying, like, "Oh my God, when that's done, it's gonna be amazing." And I just did too much. I took it past the point of where I enjoyed it, and I feel like I joyously threw it in the garbage. Like, and there were times when I started to realize what I had done.
Yeah.
That I was like, "Oh, I don't know if this can still be something that I want." And then I got to the point where I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna be done with it. Like, it's just gonna that's it." And it was a freeing, like, you know, and I mean, honestly, I still think about it sometimes. Like, oh, there were lessons there that I took, but like in that failure was stuff that I've carried with me in art and in life in other ways. That it's like, so maybe like, no, this is just me trying to give myself advice or something. Like maybe there's times when the failure is the success, or like that was the way that should have gone.
Yeah.
Like, or if there is any should, but just maybe there's a lot to be learned there, as much to be learned there, or to take with me from there as a beautiful, yay, I did it.
Well, what was a failure about that? You finished and you moved on.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Why was it
like
failure?
there is, like, you know, I'm just saying maybe I failed to accomplish what I set out to do.
Okay.
But that's in the expectations realm. That if I didn't have any expectations, then there's no failure. It was just play. It was just discovery.
Type AD.
I am a very like type A ambitious person, but it's interesting. My partner and I have a lot of conversations about why we're that way, and we're so obsessed with our contribution to others and society and how important that is. But then we're like, well, fuck that. It is a miracle to be alive. Our bodies, our brains, our lungs, can you even, if you like actually think about like what it is that our bodies function in the way they are, and then you widen that lens to like leaves on trees and nature and just like what a miracle it is to actually just exist. And then I continue to be ambitious because I chose like this path to continue to do what I'm doing and building what I'm building and contributing the way I am. But that really is just like, you know, I choose to do it, but like pretty much every day I like fall asleep just like happy that I am breathing, I'm alive, I get to witness clouds in the sky, and that usually is where my creativity comes from. I try to detach it from any contribution to anybody and just be grateful for the miracle of existence. So,
There you go. All right. Well, why taint it after that? So last time I read a poem to finish out, and I didn't find one that fit any of this, but I have two quotes. One of them is from Dolly Parton, and she says, "Find out who you are and do it on purpose."
love it.
And the other one is from Kierkegaard, which is, you know, contemporaries with Dolly Parton. And
It's almost good.
and he said, "To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself." There you go. You guys are amazing. Thank you
for
so
hosting.
much. Oh, and I have these little questions.
Worksheets, homework.
Worksheets.
See you tomorrow.